Okay, Zach. I came home. I couldn't find that video that I took. It's been a while. So this is basically my downstairs living room, and I'll just kind of take a quick video. I'll try to go over everything in the unit that I can think of. So let's just take a look. Got it all just shutting down here. I'm gonna start it up. It actually just shut down now. Sometimes it's easier to see with or without it here and get in a bad glare. So I'm just going to take the side off quick. So it's basically it's based on Linux. It's Unraid. It's an Unraid server, and it is a server over gaming VMs, but it is one. So what I've got is I've got the GTX 980. That's my third card that I use sometimes when I split the machine into three. Then I've got, it's kind of hard to see, but I've got two 1080 Ti's. So that one in the back is my 1080 Ti, and it's bridged. And then if you notice, I've got another card down there. So, and that's my second 1080 Ti that can bridge to. And so what it is it's a Threadripper 2950X. It's 16 cores, 32 threads. And the big reason that Threadripper is so great is it has an unbelievable amount of PCIe lanes for extra add-on stuff, because I have USB cards. I have a whole bunch of stuff in this thing. And it's got four channels of RAM, which it actually got 8 slots. So I got 2950X, and got all that RAM in there. It's only 64 gigs, but back in the Threadripper first gen 2900 series, which RAM was more stable, but there was a limit to how fast you could get it, and it seemed like when you went over, like when you filled all 8 DIMMs, especially when you went to the high capacity stuff at like 128 gigs, you had a really time getting the processor to overclock to and like hold stable clocks like over 4 gigahertz. So one of my main goals was to, and I got a great board, that AsRock board. It's the AsRock Gaming Professional X399 board, and it's an excellent board. I ended up originally the RAM that I had in it was supposed to work, but it wasn't like truly Threadripper stable. But I ended up swapping it out, and I went for a 64 gig kit that was, and now I've got nice solid 4.2 gigahertz on all 16 cores, like 32 threads, and 64 gigs of RAM at 2933. It managed to keep the Infinity fabric on a 1-to-1 ratio, so it's screaming fast. And especially if I do my die split right for my VMs, it works really well, because there's different chiplets, and certain chiplets have access to certain PCIe lanes, and like there's an El Topo commands and stuff that you can run when you install the right things in Linux. It'll actually tell you like the whole layout of your motherboard and what dies are connected to what, and like everything else, and your PCIe lanes, like SATA controllers, everything. So I've got 3 NVMe drives in the unit. 2 of them are 512 gig, like fast bad boys, and then I've got a 1 terabyte 660p, an Intel one, and it's pretty good too. So with Linux, what it is initially I have Linux installed on the USB drive, and I'll like fire the unit up, and it's going to load off the USB drive first. And then it's going to load into Unraid, and Unraid has that 660p set up as like a cache, not just for file transfers, but anything that it's got running in Dockers and applications. And I keep my VM settings and like different things on it too. And then that 1 terabyte also, I take a section of it and I'm running a virtual disk on it for only for machine 3, and like I run swap files on all my machines too, because even though it's a slow NVMe's are really fast. And then those other 2 512 NVMe's that I have, so it's just booting up now. This is, goes through its thing, and then the Unraid thing comes up, and now it's going to start loading Linux. Like in particular, it's really just Unraid, but it's Linux kernel. So it's just loading up now. It takes quite a while. So one thing about a server board, about nice things like that, it takes quite a while for it to boot. So I've got the other 2 NVMe's that run on my 2 main virtual machines, and then I have 3 SSDs as well that I run. One of them is cache disk, and then I've got an SSD for each one, a 2 terabyte for my main machine, and then 1 terabyte for the other ones. So each virtual machine really, when I boot them up, like, and I'll explain them later, but they run on an NVMe drive, and then they have an SSD, and then they also have a hard drive. So my 2 main ones are running 8 terabyte hard drives. It's like extra storage, and I believe I have a 4 terabyte for my third VM. So one of the things about the machine is by the time I dedicate out cores and things like that, because I want some cores from my Plex server, like she's still booting up while I'm talking. So I have, what I do is 4 cores, 8 threads go to the machine itself, and they run my Plex server. I have an ARC server, and they run Linux Unraid itself, and they run the actual Unraid array too. So I also have an Unraid array, which you can see here. So this is my parity disk, and then 1, 2, 3, 4. So I have 4 8 terabyte hard drives as well. So I got like a 4 terabyte Unraid array, and then you can see down here I've got my 4 terabytes and then an 8 terabyte. So actually two of my VMs right now only have a 4 terabyte, but at some point I'll get them up to an 8 terabyte, probably enterprise drive. They handle data better. Okay, so Unraid booted, and really the way I've got it set up now is it's technically what I call headless. So once it boots up, it doesn't take one of my video cards. Now my video cards are starting up, and like it's booting my VM. So there's VM 3, which I call Bell, and it's the least powerful of the VMs. Technically right now when I run 3 VMs, so that one's booting. I gotta turn the monitors on these. So right now what I do is 4 cores, 8 threads to Linux, Unraid in the machine. It runs the Unraid setup, I can show it. And then 4 cores, 8 threads out to that machine. And then 4 cores, 8 threads out to this VM here, and 4 cores, 8 threads out to this VM here. So I'll just boot up. I mean, I can boot them all up. But the neat thing about running the virtual machine is I've done it a few ways, and like I've done a lot of learning. And one of the big things is you have to get over UI, user interfaces, when you're running Linux, and you have to get into doing kernel code. Well, not necessarily in kernel like level code, but like you have to know a little bit of scripting, and you have to understand the language in which to communicate and like the basics of it. So there's like a little bit to learn, but like once you do that, especially when I was creating my VMs, all of a sudden the world opened up to me, because like the user interface is only showing you like the tip of the iceberg and like configuration options, right? So anyways, it's booted up right now, and I'm just like, okay, so I'm going to do like a file explorer. And so this is technically like my secondary machine, but there's my NVMe drive, and it's got basically a 1 terabyte or a 960 SSD, but it's a SATA SSD. And then I've got my hard drive, and then like I said, I have a scratch disk that comes off that other NVMe drive, which is really handy to have. And then there's my well, it's reading 29 terabytes right now, but there's my Unraid drive as well. And then same deal with that one, except it actually has a 2 terabyte SSD and an 8 terabyte hard drive in it, so I have more. This is also basically my main machine. It runs my VR setup, which I've got a 4 sensor setup for my VR, so it picks up the VR really well. But and what was happening with the board, like virtual IO and being able to like set up everything, I had 3 controllers, but I had to leave my base controller, my USB 2 controller, and I had to leave it alone and give it to Unraid just for it to boot off the USB key, because I have to have it boot off of that. If I dedicate it out, then the whole system crashes. And then it gave me 2 other controllers, but with the bandwidth and stuff that you draw with VR and stuff, I ended up putting another controller in the back here. I don't know, it's kind of hard to see, but it's a 4-port USB 3.1 controller, and then I also ran some secondary off it. But the nice thing about that is it was a server grade one with what you call SRIOV, which allows you to actually to split out, because like some of them you can't do it. You can only dedicate, even though it has like 4 controllers, you can only dedicate the 4 of them as because it doesn't have the proper PCIe splitter in it. Where this one, SRIOV, I can actually split it right up. I could dedicate each one of those out to a VM or whatever I want to do, so it gives me a little bit more that way. But right now it just basically runs my VR setup, because with the 4 camera sensors it draws a lot, but it handles it pretty well. So when we get into like the Unraid UI here, I'm just going to load it up. Dashboard here. So give a quick look. This is again, this is the UI, but there's basically my 4 8 terabyte hard drives, right? And then that's my That's my parity disk, and then like what I'm using of the drives over here. And then there's that Intel 1 terabyte NVMe, and like what I've basically used on it between like virtual machine, everything else, and like all of my scratch disks and stuff like that. And then the flash drive that it boots up. And then I install unassigned devices to handle other media and everything else. Because like in this, I actually have so many SATAs that my 8 SATA ports on board weren't enough, so I got another 8, so I can handle up to like 16 SATAs plus the 3 NVMe's. And like Unraid with the Pro license, it'll handle all of it and things. This is my dashboard, just telling me what's going on with the 16 cores and then the hyper-threading cores here, and like overall usage, and then my RAM usage, because I have 64 gigs, and like basically what I'm using of it right now. And like I'm split up with my VMs, so this looks like 6 Windows VMs, but what it actually is, and like with the name scheme, if you look, I have one primary VM that I use all the time. Oh, I just moved it here. Hang on, move it back up. So Jasmine's my main, and 1.1 means that this is virtual machine 1 of 1 in this setup. So in this setup, I give just what I have to Unraid to handle all of the background, everything else, like, because technically, even with like the splitting and like the PCIe splitting and stuff, like Linux is still needing some cores to handle some of that. And like depending on what you have for hard drives and data like that, it actually does use a little bit. So I have 4 cores, 8 threads that I dedicate out to that. But then my other, like technically 12 cores, 24 threads total, I dedicate out to this machine, Jasmine, and this is my primary. So you want to play VR, you want to have like the best gaming experience possible, I'll shut down the other VMs and I load Jasmine, and that gives me, oh, I moved it again, that gives me the ability, I keep wanting to highlight, and in Linux you can't really do that, like especially with the UI that you get online here. But anyways, with that, that's everything, and that's my two 1080 Ti's, and like it's strapped together, and if I want I can, like, not that many games support SLI, but it's possible to do that. And then my second set is my second set here, 2-1, 2-2. So Jasmine again, my primary, and Ariel. So what it is I got the 4 cores, 8 threads that I dedicate out to Linux, and then I split it down the middle. So they each get 6 cores, 12 threads, which a lot of time this is the mode, I did it again, but a lot of time this is the mode that I run these two in. And then when Jake wants to play or have people over, I can actually split my machine into 3. And Bell being my third one, it's the one that shares the NVMe scratch disk. It does have 1 terabyte SATA SSD in it, but it's got the 4 terabyte hard drive, which really, like, my secondary gaming systems don't need to have a bunch of stuff on the hard drives. But when I do VR and stuff on my main system, it's got 5.1, everything else, and like the VR, like all of a sudden now I've got a lot of games, a lot of installs and things, and it gives me the space to handle it, which is great. And like the UI, it's pretty great. Like, it tells you the health and temperatures of all of your disks and like everything that's going on, and if there's any smart troubles or anything that's happening that way. It's a pretty great system. And like in the settings, even in the UI, like you can do all sorts of like pinning, telling what VMs run on what CPU pins and everything else. And like, again, you can use ls topo, and it'll tell you what CPU cores are pinned to what PCIe lanes and stuff, which allows you to make sure that your cores have direct access to your video card, which really helps speed things up. And you can do memory sharing. There's quite a bit in Threadripper that you aren't going to see in a standard gaming machine. And again, it's a server, so it's meant to. Like, my Plex server's up right now. I would leave my Arc server up all the time. It really doesn't draw a lot, but the days for the island keep going, and there's stuff where it's down. So I only turn it on when I'm actually playing Arc, and then we log in. But like, what I can do here in my VMs is I can actually tell it to load different machines and do different things depending on what I want it to do. So what I have to do, I wonder if I can do this live. Let's see. So I can shut down Bell. I can shut down Jasmine because I'm on Ariel. So like, these machines now are just shutting down the VMs, just like you turn off the machine. Like, it even turns my amp off when everything shuts down. And then I gotta be able to shut down Ariel, because this is the machine that I'm on, to boot up Jasmine, and Ariel is the 2, or like my main one, like depending on what I want to do, right? And a lot of times I can do that from the UI on my phone. So my phone has the access and, runs everything else. But yeah, I have the option to go from like one great gaming machine to two like really good gaming machines that don't see lag and they can run AAA titles and everything else, to like three pretty decent gaming machines. But I am starting to get a little bit CPU bound. And I'd love to try and get that processor a little bit higher than 4.2, but it's really hard to do. And the other thing about Threadripper dies is to do 4.2, you got a lot of voltage and a lot of cores, so it runs really hot. But I ended up getting, from what I saw in all my research, triple, like a 360 rad, and it actually has 6 fans on it. So it's got 3 on the top pulling, and then 3 on the bottom pushing, and then I've got 3 fans in the front over my hard drives because it's quite the array, and I got 1 in the back just to move air and get things going. But like those 6 fans, when I'm gaming and stuff and I'm running that processor hard, especially when you're running like 3 VMs, because now I'm actually running 4 operating systems. So I have the Unraid operating system going, and then I'm running 3 other operating systems, and like all the background stuff that runs for 3 of them, plus the games and everything else. And then I went with the standard like blower, like the FE, like the standard cards, because they exhaust the heat out the back, right? So when I have this thing closed up, it draws air in the bottom and it'll draw it in the front across the hard drive. It's got a nice opening, and then it exhausts it out the top and the back and out the video cards and stuff. And like when it's running, it like really draws. Like, to be totally honest, I got a 1600 P2 in it, like a Corsair oh no, it's an EVGA P2, but like a high end power supply. And when I'm gaming hard and I got my system working, like I'm drawing somewhere between 12, I've seen 1370 watts off of this system with like what I'm drawing. Like at some point I'll probably go to a 2080. I'd like to get a 2080 Ti, or maybe even just go to like the 3080, because they're pretty reasonably priced and stuff. But like down the road or something, I don't have the money right now. And like honestly, the system just rips with everything that's in it. But it's been a crazy journey to get there, and I had to learn a little bit of like how to write scripts and everything else. And now I like get backup scripts, and like I can, take three gaming VMs and like the installs for them, and write scripts to like run and change hardware and everything else, because like it's different hardware, different CPU, depending on whether I'm running one machine, like 1 VM, 2 VMs, or 3 VMs. But I have it all set up, and it's really nice. And I just have shortcuts on my phone, and I just hit it, shuts everything down, turns them on how I want. Like it works like really well, right? Like fire up Jasmine again here. I'll fire up Bell. So like you can just do what you want that way. Lots of hiccups. It's been quite the journey, but like the system's stable. It's working really well. I game on it all the time. Like the machine basically stays on all the time, and I literally have I have PCIe lanes left, but I don't have any slots. So I have to, if I want to do that, I have to get into bifurcation and split it up. And I still only have like, out of, I forget how many lanes I have, like 60 something, 64 lanes or something. I do have 8 more available that I could do something with, but like I got this machine really split out, and like it just runs great, right? So just started up the other 2 VMs, and they run really well. And like just have my USB like hubs, actual hubs split out, so that way I can just plug devices in for each one. They all have they all have Bluetooth, and like I can connect Xbox controllers to them. We can all game at the same time without hiccups. And like this one's got the sound and all the monitors, and it's got a setup there. This one's got TV sound. It's got the 5.1 surround setup. It's also hooked up to the VR and everything else, and it runs great that way. And then I got this one over here. That monitor doesn't actually have sound, but I got the Bluetooth, so we just do Bluetooth headphones and whatever else. And like it's the third gamer. It really doesn't do a lot, but at like some point the 980 will get swapped out, and I'll put something better in. But like for now, system rips. I could go into all the details and like configuration and like everything else, but I've got the hardware really tweaked, and it took me a while to get the right RAM and get that Threadripper and board and everything just like tweaked up. And then like all 3 of my video cards, I've got them like overclocked and cranked, and like everything's stable, and like it's running really well. And like got the NVMe drives and SSDs, and like it's been a real project machine, to say the least. Like now that it's been up and running, it's been great, but like a lot of headaches, and it took a really long time to learn enough to get it stable. And it took me too long to get comfortable with, or like wanting to learn to get comfortable with the scripts. and like everything that's involved in the script, especially in the VM scripts and stuff like that. And then as well, like the scripts and stuff for like how to properly set up Dockers and everything else, and like port forwarding and stuff, and like, you know, get that going, because like you want to run a Docker, well, you got to forward those ports through the host OS, and like there's some involved there too. And yeah, but I've got it running, runs really well. And you know, I got printers and everything, and like all hooked up through the network. And the nice thing about this one is it's got a 10 gig LAN, and it's got 2.5 gig LANs on it too. And I have like those dedicated out, the, you know, the 10 gigs goes to the host machine, and then VM3 if needed. And then each one of my two main gaming VMs, this one and this one, each have a 2.5 gig, you know, Ethernet line to them too, for just access to the home network. And like if I have to like pull anything off of the Unraid drives or anything like that, because like that goes over the network end too. So yeah, lots to it. Great system. Video ended up a lot longer than I thought, but I'll just do quick shot here. Yeah, those are the hard drives and the SSDs. Of course, you can't see the NVMe's, they're in behind. But yeah, behind the tempered glass and stuff, like it's a pretty sleek looking case and stuff, and it draws air off the one side and the back. See them there. And then what's nice is I have this room in the back, and if you put your hand there when the front's on it, it'll draw air through, which is good, because that draws some air over the VRMs and you know, the big heat sinks and stuff that are on the board too, because it's a pretty jammed up machine, but it rips.